And so we're not going to have a run really starting until January, February next year that will run into end of first quarter, second quarter, maybe even third quarter. And what that means is, and this is where the market for Bitcoin is going to be infinitely bigger than anyone can imagine, because everyone else on Earth, once they figure out what Bitcoin is, the majority of their value is going to be tied up in Bitcoin. And so 99% of 7 billion people are going to have their wealth tied up in Bitcoin, which means the market for Bitcoin needs to be 100 times bigger than the total assets in the world right now. To say that there's $1 billion Bitcoin in the future, I'm certain of that. My expectation is Bitcoin goes to $1 billion a coin, and I think it will be in our lifetime.
So there's always debates about that, but just for the average person, how do you delineate or define, hey, there's this protocol these banks are using? And I guess maybe the question possibly is, how do you get people, because they're going to use it, countries are using it, JP Morgan, like you said, all these people are using it, but how do we educate people that, hey, this is a protocol outside of the banks need it, and countries need it, we need it, individuals need it, but this is something that's outside of these people. Actually, it's not just another asset inside of JP Morgan or another asset inside your portfolio type of thing. How do you square that circle?
I think it's a tough one conceptually to square, because we don't really have a precursor or something that we can look to really identify that. And this is where analogies help, but they're not perfect. And if I think about that, it's probably the difference between an analog network and a digital network using the internet. A cable phone works fine, and you were able to call London to New York across the Atlantic using copper wires. And now we have the internet, which is literally everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And so it is really a protocol that improves human performance. It improves everyone's outcomes on a long enough timescale. And this is where I look at the banks incorporating this are a big tell. They're going to want to be first to this. And Jamie's no fool. He's really smart. He's run a very successful business, and he's arguably the leader of the free world when it comes to banking. And he wants to ensure that the US dominates this moving forward. They now have a positive regime and support of regulatory guidance from the existing or the new administration. That's a huge thing. And the beauty of that is that that's really a trickle-down effect globally. Without going into politics, we've seen the EU come up with a somewhat of a power play where they want to regulate crypto. So they've created the MiCA rules and regulations for Bitcoin and all of crypto. Ironically, that is going to mean nothing in the US, and everyone will literally discard that regulation and go with whatever the US says. And Jamie Dimon's perfectly positioned to take advantage of this. And this is where I think one of the key points I really like to stress about Bitcoin and collateral, and why this will be a big thing moving forward for the banks, is the banks make money speculating on volatility. The most volatile asset in the world is Bitcoin, and this allows them to speculate on the most volatile asset and consequentially make the most amount of money possible. The other huge benefit from a societal impact perspective is that when you divorce Wall Street speculation from Main Street consequence, that allows us to de-lever the housing market, the stock market, and everything else. And the really important point I'd like to stress is this allows the banks to speculate. So we have Wall Street speculation without Main Street consequence. So this is going to help demonetize the housing market, probably demonetize the US stock market, well, global stock markets, and really the bond market too. So it'll give them an asset to speculate on. Wall Street will be happy because they'll make more money than they ever have. And this is where I guess some of my father's friends tell me that, Bitcoin's no good because you can't live in a Bitcoin. But that's precisely why this is the best form of collateral ever invented. The fact that you can collateralize this asset and that you can't live in it is precisely the reason why this asset is going to accrue 1,000 times the value that it currently holds, because this is a better form of collateral that doesn't have downstream consequences for having to force people out of their homes or increase housing unaffordability and all sorts of social impacts.
Is Australia doing anything similar? Because obviously the EU, like you just mentioned, there's a lot of, cash caps, freezing of accounts, talks about bail-ins, all kinds of different stuff going on there. And even in America, a couple of years ago, there was a viral video from like late 2022 when the FDIC here, the people that are supposed to, the irony is just dripping with irony. The people that are supposed to, the Deposit Insurance Corporation, guaranteeing people's deposits, are like, yeah, they'll get bailed in. The depositors are going to get bailed in, so for the average person, your money's getting taken from your account and there's nothing you can do about it, frozen or whatever. Is that stuff going on in Australia as well, or talk of that? Like what do you see across the world here? It feels like, smells like, sounds like there's a lot of this talk for a number of years. Happened in Cyprus, obviously 12 years ago. And people just act like, oh, this is, this couldn't happen. And there's not, nothing to see here. When it's like, man, how many signposts, how many exit ramps do you need along the highway before you realize, yeah, I don't control any of this. This isn't my money. And at the drop of a hat, I could be a criminal, or I could be taken from me. It's wild.
It is something that you have to experience to really comprehend and appreciate just how fragile our banking system is and how little control of what you think is your money that you have. And an example I'll give you, to your point, we had a client recently try and move $500,000 to an existing and linked exchange account. They had transferred $100, then they transferred $10,000, then $100,000. And this was the third transaction that they'd made to this same and one bank account. And they were called from the fraud department of the bank to say, oh, are you aware you're sending this money to a new bank account? And it was like, it's not a new bank account. This has gone to the same bank this is the fourth time we've sent to this bank account. Anyway, and this is where I would like to commend the banks on, having a very stringent fraud team to ensure that nothing awry happens. But at the same time, a whole host of hurdles had to be overcome in order for the bank to feel comfortable to let that transaction through. Now, I'm grateful for the fraud department existing in that capacity, but why has it taken 4 transactions for the bank to then step into action to say, hey, is this a fraudulent transaction that you're looking to make? And secondly, there was a complete lack of control for the client unless they answered all of the questions to the satisfaction of the bank to allow that transaction to pass. And we've had multiple clients who have tried to make transactions and then have had to literally find alternative banking arrangements because their bank has cancelled or has forbidden a transaction to a local exchange. Now, I'm hoping that the advent of the new administration in the US and the willingness to regulate in a proactive manner the crypto environment is positive, but that will take time to flow through. But at the same time, and as things stand at this point in time, this is a global phenomenon where moving Bitcoin or moving cash, fiat, onto Bitcoin rails is very difficult and fraught with a whole host of hurdles to overcome.
Yeah, it truly is. What are your thoughts on the just the cycles right now in general, in the sense of, there's obviously the meme in the Bitcoin space of the 3 green candles and then 1 red candle. Now it's like the 2 green, 1 red, 1 green. Like what are your thoughts on just are the cycles elongated now? Is there going to be a super cycle? The cycles are done. Like how do you see things kind of playing out here?
I think one of 2 things will happen. I believe that the political environment has far more sway over the Bitcoin cycles now than in previous cycles. I think the Trump administration is acutely aware of that. Mm-hmm. Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, is doing everything he can to have a booming economy into the midterms next year. Mm-hmm. They're all political beasts and they want to make sure that their agendas get fulfilled. I've got no dog in that fight, so leave me out of the politics, but just commenting from a macro perspective and what I see happening in the markets, I see that they're going to be really strong or delayed. And so we're not going to have a run really starting until January, February next year that will run into maybe end of first quarter, second quarter, maybe even third quarter. And what that means is that's going to be a really hot economic environment where everyone's positive on the economy. And that gives Trump and the Republicans the greatest chance of winning the midterms. That's my highest probability of what's going to happen moving forward. However, I think there's an alternative scenario that could happen, and I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility with what we've seen with, I guess, a whole host of altcoins moving and coming to market. I think what we could see is an extended period of relatively low volatility and this, 100K price, basically being a magnet, both up and down, where a whole host of people are thinking that that's a really good point to exit. And what we'll see is we could see basically a lot of selling between now and mid to late next year where the price doesn't move much from where it is. And then towards the back end of the year, that I think the realization for a whole host of OG Bitcoiners, they'll realize that, hey, this was meant to be the 80% drop in the market. This was meant to be the red flag, the green, red. Mm-hmm. Well, all of a sudden we haven't had a red. And all of a sudden that buying, all of the buying has basically brought up that supply that they took to market, and they realize they're on the wrong side of it and they need to get that Bitcoin back. And we could see people chasing that Bitcoin into the end of 2026 and 2027 after a very, very low volatility period, which will really exhaust a whole host of Bitcoin hodlers.
Generational wealth doesn't happen by accident. Bitcoin fixed the money, but it didn't fix the system of protecting and passing it on. Bitcoiners, we have to live in two different worlds, idealism versus pragmatism. That's where Meanwhile comes in. It's the world's first Bitcoin-denominated life insurance company, regulated in Bermuda and built entirely by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. With Meanwhile, long-term holders can grow and protect their Bitcoin wealth through tax-free policy loans, no repayment obligation, no margin call risk, while making inheritance simple and secure and entirely in Bitcoin. It's about sovereignty, stewardship, and building a legacy that lasts centuries. Because if Bitcoin is forever, your plan should be too. Learn more and sign up with code 4QPBWC at meanwhile.bm. That's meanwhile.bm, code 4QPBWC, or just sign up, the link in the description below. All right, real talk for a second. We all know health insurance is basically the fiat system of healthcare. The biggest debauchery there is. It's expensive, confusing. Somehow you still end up paying hundreds of dollars for a Band-Aid. We moved to crowd sharing almost 5 years ago. It's the best decision we ever made. Instead of sending your money to the insurance company's black hole, you join a like-minded community that directly funds each other's medical bills. Simple, transparent, way cheaper. And that difference you save, you can invest in Bitcoin. It's an amazing win-win. And look, we're part of the Bitcoin community because we believe in freedom, decentralization. Crowd Health brings that same mindset to healthcare. You choose your doctor, you pay in cash, and the community's got your back when the big bills hit. No networks, no middlemen, no bureaucrats trying to approve your care, just people helping people the way it should be. You make decisions about your health. That's as sovereign as it gets. So if you're ready to take the orange pill for your health, this open enrollment, go to Join Crowd Health to get started for $99 for your first 3 months using code Brandon at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code Brandon. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out. Take your power back. This is how we win. If you haven't been living under a rock recently, you've seen that the world is completely changing. Seizures, freezing of assets, bail-ins, bailouts, everything and everyone are coming after your money, your time and energy, because the system is collapsing in and of itself. That's why Foundation created the Passport Core. Bitcoin revolution is 2 words: self-custody. Custodying your assets in your mind. This generates the private key to store your wealth forever. This is the revolution. Foundation is built on sovereignty, freedom, and privacy. Go to foundation.xyz/Brandon for $10 off your Passport Core. This beautiful, sleek foundation wallet is everything you need. The ergonomics, the feel, the weight are absolutely incredible. It also comes with the free Envoy app. You can buy Bitcoin straight into self-custody, label and track your coins, send secure air-gap transactions in seconds, beginner-friendly, but also powerful enough for the pros. Foundation is built for sovereignty, so you can take back control of your money in your digital life. Get started today, again, at foundation.xyz/Brandon for $10 off your Passport Core. Yeah, and it's fascinating because, again, it's kind of coming back to the talk on the Square stuff and Jack Dorsey and the medium exchange. I mean, it's just, again, these arguments for years that have gone on where it's, Bitcoin's not this, it's not that. And it's, the beauty of Bitcoin is it's everything, it's everything all at one time. That's what kind of makes it hard. It's a collectible, it's a store of value, it's a medium exchange, and it's a unit of account. So it's doing those things. Like you said, it's a collateral. It's also, you can use it day to day, instant settlement. It really is. It's just mind bending. It breaks people's brains because we just haven't had it before. We've never seen anything like this. So it's really remarkable. I want to get your thoughts on this great rotation, the Jordy Visser piece that went viral over the last little bit here, and Bitcoin's IPO moment, and this rotation we've seen a lot of the older coins, whales, OGs over the last year or two, really 2024 as well. I think 2024 might have been bigger at this point than even 2025 was. And so I'd love your thoughts on just, that piece, but also this rotation we've seen that's really got people down in the dumps right now.
I think Geordie's piece was seminal, and it really caught fire, which I was thrilled to see. Geordie's comes up with some brilliant work, and for anyone who's been around markets and watching that whole IPO space, typically the founders of a new to market IPO have a lock-in period where they've got to hold that for a period of time before they then sell and take some of their equity out. And a lot of people do that just to de-risk themselves personally. The IPO moment, for most entrepreneurs, very rarely comes. That liquidity injection that you get, or what we call a cashectomy, where you get to take some money off the table, is a very rare event for entrepreneurs. But for Bitcoiners, it's a very real thing. And this is where it makes sense that if you have invested all of your time and energy over a 10-year period or more, maybe even 15 years into this thing, and you see 1,000x or a 10,000x return, there isn't a meaningful difference between being worth 20 million bucks or being worth $2 billion. This is a conversation I had with my father many moons ago, just after the GFC. We got to see a whole host of people near financial ruin on the back of that. And we got to talking, and one of the great pieces of advice he mentioned was, there's really no difference between being worth 20 million or 500 million, but the risk to being worth 500 million and the risks you've got to take to get there are enormous relative to being worth $20 million. Over a period of 40 years, most people with dedication and discipline can get to a $20 million net worth. And on the back of that, your kids don't go to different schools, you eat at the same restaurants, you live in the same neighborhood, you go on the same holidays. The only difference is you either fly your private jet there or the holiday place that you go to, you're living in your own house over there. So there's very little difference, but there's a huge amount of risk in going from being worth 20 million to 500 or more. The reason why I bring that up is I think there's a whole host of Bitcoiners who never dreamed that they would be as wealthy as they are. And this is where conversations I've had with a whole host of Bitcoiners who are sitting on 1,000 plus coins, they never dreamt that they would have hundreds of millions of dollars of net worth, and to sell 10, 20, 30%, some of them are even selling 50% to take that off the table. It makes perfect sense. They've not touched it for over a 10-year period. They've woken up extremely wealthy and they want to enjoy some of that. Arguably an extreme case of this is talking to a client who had basically sat on this, 1,000 coins for over 10 years, and he was still renting a 3-bedroom apartment and driving a 10-year-old car. And, there comes a point in time where, you can't die with Bitcoin. Yeah. Well, technically you can. That's the funny thing about it. But, there's no place to use it when you're dead. Yeah. So you may as well do some living while you can.
It is fascinating because there's so many, 10 years ago, there were so many products, so like when a lot of the whales or OGs, 10 years ago and beyond bought Bitcoin or mined for Bitcoin, there wasn't easy places to, it wasn't as easy to spend, or it wasn't as easy to use some of the financial services, or there really wasn't places to lend against it necessarily. And now there are a ton. I mean, you guys, have products that you're working on. Meanwhile, the life insurance, Bitcoin denominated life insurance. Jack Mallers has his stuff he's building. There's so many different options now. I'm curious as to why you think there's been such a rotation, out, maybe selling. But I know some of it's like in ETFs, but maybe you could break that down a little bit of maybe what you're seeing of OG's whales going into maybe straight up selling versus rotating into ETFs versus, hey, why aren't you lending out? Why aren't you again using this yen carry trade, this arbitrage in between these assets to keep your coins and keep your Bitcoin and have the fiat?
Yeah, I think there's many reasons. One reason I am certain of, from an OG perspective, who have been in Bitcoin for 10, 15 years, they're self-custodying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And I can tell you that would become exhausting. Imagine self-custodying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of your net worth. And if you make a mistake, it's all gone. I look at that and think Bitcoin wears people down. And this is where that responsibility and accountability, as much as the community loves it, I think there comes a point in time where you realize, I need to de-risk myself in some way, shape or form. To give you an example of this, we run a collaborative security service where clients can self-custody their Bitcoin, but they've got a whole host of redundancies built into their self-custody that they can't lose it. A lot of people on the Bitcoin bandwagon are like, not your keys, not your coins. No, you need to have 100% self-sovereignty. But I can tell you there's a time and a place for everything. And this is where working with clients who are, say, the next generation or two above me, my father's age, parents' age, they're getting to the age now where they're 70 plus years of age. And we've dealt with multiple clients who have got dementia or Alzheimer's, basically mental illness setting in where it's going to affect their mental faculties. And this is where having services built out around this are really important to ensure that people don't lose their coins. There's a service for everything. And I think the important thing to look at in this great rotation is that where we are from where we were 10 years ago is a dramatic improvement. To your point, there's now insurance companies, there's custody companies, there's loan companies, there's a financial services network being built out around this. And it's really clunky at the moment. I'll admit that the user experience isn't great, but we're fast approaching and we're improving every single day on that. So what we're going to see over the next 10 years is we are going to have mainstream adoption and Bitcoin will be ubiquitous. We won't even know we're using Bitcoin in 10 years' time. But all of these things need to be built out in the meantime. And this is where, for those early Bitcoiners who've been holding on to Bitcoin for a long period of time, I just think of that meme from the Green Mile, I'm tired, boss. Like Bitcoin can wear you down. Yeah. The volatility and the cortisol that you expend in holding it, it can really grind on you. But there are fantastic rewards that you can't get with anything else. And to make light of this, holding Bitcoin as a major holding in your portfolio is a really great way of becoming or building an inbuilt immunity to any volatility in the broader portfolio. So with the cortisol comes the immunity to volatility. So that ends up being a good thing long term.
So it makes me think of something else too. I would love for your thoughts, or just maybe unpack a little bit. Like, there's a lot of people probably watching this who, they own Bitcoin, obviously, or they're thinking about getting some. Maybe they have a high fiat net worth and they're looking to make a big purchase, or again, they maybe have a lot of coins, a lot of Bitcoin, and they're wealthy now, and they're going to be much wealthier. Everyone watching is going to be much wealthier in the future. And so, what are some different ways, like you said, the collaborative custody, there's, meanwhile, like the life insurance, there's all these different products that are being built. Like what are the Rockefeller, some of these huge people. And again, I want to be careful using some of the names of the families, but the Rockefellers at least seemingly have done a good job. The Vanderbilts did not do a good job. So again, this is an important thing. It's a future forward thing, but at the same time, we're dealing with it now in the sense of OGs and whales, but also as this goes the next 5, 10 years, 15 years, it's going to really become a big issue that people are dealing with.
Yeah, I look at this, and when we're doing legacy planning for clients, we look at what are the best assets that we can hold for the longest period of time that's going to create the least amount of churn. Because every time you churn an asset, you're going to have to pay taxes on that. And this is a real problem for maintaining and growing wealth long term. In Australia, we have a 25% capital gains tax if you hold that asset for more than a year. If you hold it for less than a year, it's up to your marginal tax rate, so 50 cents in the dollar gets taxed. In the US are pretty similar rates as well. And when you're planning for leaving a legacy and look at the chessboard of your assets and what you can hold long term that's going to deliver returns into the future for the lowest risk possible. This is biased, but I get to study this day every day for the last 25, 30 years. To me, there's no better asset for a family to hold long term that is going to give you the protection from an asset protection perspective, protection against debasement. It's a future-proof investment that's going to that's going to have huge difficulty being superseded, because what Bitcoin fundamentally is a network of trust. It's selling trust. Mm-hmm. It's a ledger that is the most secure ledger on earth. It's the longest form of an immutable ledger that we've had. And in time, people will understand that is a hugely valuable commodity. And so in order for anything to supersede Bitcoin, it's going to have a longer track record of an immutable ledger. And so Bitcoin's got a 15 or 16-year head start on that now. And so I don't really see that being superseded. And it feels like the tech world has basically passed that honor to the Bitcoin network. Now, what's interesting about that is the most valuable commodity that humans have had over time, since time immemorial, has been trust. If you had trust, you had nothing. You were kicked out of the tribe. Mm-hmm. If you have trust, you have the ability to work and leverage that trust with other people to create favors and pay people back and really create a network for yourself that's very valuable. I'm thinking about this in primal times, but Bitcoin being a trust network is only something that's going to grow and be further ingratiated into our future societies. And I look at this and think, imagine you could go back to the 1900s, or better yet, the 1850s, and buy up every oil well in the world. You can own a part of that. But this is even better because it's a Bitcoin network. And I think it'll be far more valuable than any oil network that there is. And so for me, we're trying to position our families to have as much Bitcoin as possible and then secure that for the long term, because we think that no other asset is going to compete with it on a returns perspective or an asset protection perspective as well. There's just some things that you can do with Bitcoin that you just can't do with any other asset. And when the world wakes up to this, families, institutions, corporations, governments, and individuals will want to have the majority of their wealth stored in Bitcoin versus any other asset.
Do you guys use, for the stuff that you do, is there any work that you guys do, with Fedimint or things of that nature, and some like the second and third layers of the protocol, or Lightning or Liquid or anything?
I'm just starting to understand the value and the power of the Lightning Network. I've been very skeptical of that for a very long period. I had a great conversation with a dear friend who we both know, Jeff Booth,
yep.
Who basically expounded the virtues of the Lightning Network and how critical it is for all of us moving forward. And this is something I came away with really excited. We spent a lot of time talking about Fedimint and the benefits of that on so many levels. And I'm really excited to see that ingratiated into a day-to-day payment system. And there are a whole host of other benefits associated to that too. So after being very skeptical on this Lightning Network, I am wildly positive on it. And I think the third layer or other second layer option with the Liquid Network as well has a whole host of benefits as well, with being much better from a programmability perspective. That lends itself to all sorts of financial products that you can build on it. And the funny thing with Liquid, which I don't think really gets enough credit, is any crypto coin that you see out there, Ethereum, Solana, you name it, the technology now exists to build that on the Liquid network. And this is where I've got hats off to Samson and Blockstream for basically building this out. Liquid network was built out in 2016. I think they abandoned it because they had the block size wars to deal with and contend with. So Adam and Samson basically had full attention on that, and Liquid was not going to fly in that type environment. But understanding what the constraints are with layer 2 and the Lightning Network, this is where there is a time and a place for everything. And this is where would I have all of my Bitcoin sitting on layer 2 networks in Lightning and Liquid? Absolutely not. But I think it's a really important step of increasing user experience, usability, having the adoption rate go up dramatically, because this is basically a really easy app that's easy to download, and within 2 minutes you can have a transfer payment. And this is where we gave a presentation in a boardroom in Sydney last Friday. There would have been 20 people in the room sitting around the boardroom. We asked them to download the wallet of Satoshi, and we facilitated a $10 payment to everyone sitting at that table in less than 10 minutes. It's amazing. It's amazing technology to see that.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'm curious why. So again, Lightning is, I would love your thoughts on why you've been skeptical of Lightning, and just unpack that for a second, because that is something that there are a lot of people that, again, another one of those debates. And there's a lot of people that are, hey, that's not real Bitcoin, which again, it's a settlement layer. It goes in layers, and it has to come down and settle on top of the Bitcoin first layer. So you're bunching these transactions, just for someone that might not be super familiar with Lightning. But what were your reasons for just being really skeptical about it?
I think the major reason was the scalability of the Lightning Network.
Okay.
And the big issue I had with this was we have, on the base layer, we've got 7 transactions per second. And in order to open and close a channel on the Lightning Network, we need two base layer transactions. So that means to open a Lightning channel for every single person, 8 billion people on Earth, it's going to take, if every transaction on the base layer was dedicated to that, it's going to take roughly something like 30 years to get done. And I look at that, we got 230 million something transactions a year. And it's going to take many years to get that done, 30, 35 years just to open the channels, another 35 years to close it. And this is where the amalgamation, the federation or Fedimint is really powerful, in that you don't need to open a channel for everyone using that federation in the Fedimint model. You can scale that infinitely without having a base layer transaction on it. So obviously there's one base layer transaction that needs to happen, or multiple, but it's a way of scaling Bitcoin to the masses in arguably a custodial manner that is acceptable to most Bitcoiners. And this is where I think Bitcoin goes in grades. For amounts under, say, $100 or $500 or $1,000, most people are okay to have a layer 2 or layer 3.
Right.
They're not really too fussed about that. From $1,000 to $20,000, well, that's a much bigger amount. So they want to have maybe a Lightning Network channel that they can close and take that money back if needed. And then for amounts basically that you're not prepared to lose, then you want to have that on the base layer. And this is where Bitcoin isn't one thing, and it's evolving day to day. And this is the beauty about it, that there is basically a channel and a layer for everything that you want to do now on Bitcoin. The problem is we just need to really explain the layer 2, layer 3 options, because I don't think people really understand that. And probably the best thing that we can do is have it adopted by Square and companies like that. So no one has to explain layer 2 and layer 3 Bitcoin. It's just ubiquitous, and we're using it. It's like breathing air. We're not thinking about it.
It is, and it's really tough, Peter. I mean, like, obviously the last year or two, fear and greed are what drive humans, whether we like it or not. And I get a lot of comments on here, and it's like, well, hey, talk about this fight that's going on, core versus knots, or do this and that. And at the end of the day, if you talk about these great, like if you and I sat here and talk about Lightning and Fedimint, we'd have like 100 people watch, and and there are some people that that's their thing, and they're obsessed with that, and everyone has their own angle. I mean, my angle, I look at it as, hey, like, how can I bring as much education about Bitcoin and sound money to a couple percent of the human population, so that way those people, because it's not for everyone. To your point, we're not going to have 50% of the world like be orange pilled and like understand sound money in Bitcoin. Look, they don't even understand the fiat system. So how the hell are they going to understand Bitcoin? They're not, so I look at my job as, hey, how can I find a couple percent of the world, which is a big pool of people that think like we do, and we're going to this is the thing I think people forget too, is there's some people out there. There's the Steve Jobs out there. There's some other people out there that are incredibly badass that we haven't found yet. We haven't brought them to our team yet. They just need to be orange pilled. They just need to right time, right place, and they will come fix and solve some of these problems very quickly that we have still inside of Bitcoin. And anyway, I love your thoughts on that.
I think you're right. And this is where, if you look at the thing that everyone has in common, 8 billion people on Earth, and this is where I spend a lot of time thinking about what the possibility of the price is, we all have that fear and greed motivator. Yes. We're greedy and we're fearful, and they are the two biggest drivers of human behavior. So how do we get people to Bitcoin? This is where, in historical terms, and this is probably quite a nuanced take, so I'll take my time explaining it if that's okay. Yeah, but one of the most important people in the history of Bitcoin has been PlanB. Now, he is a polarizing figure, but he created a model that showed people that Bitcoin was going to go up with certainty, and he brought millions of people to Bitcoin that would never have seen it. Yeah. I think he was instrumental, his work in the stock to flow model, in getting institutional eyes on Bitcoin and then seeing that this is a real asset that they want to hold. Now, people want to rubbish him for his contribution to it, but I look at this and think, no, that was one of the most important contributions that we had in the Bitcoin space, because that got millions of people looking at Bitcoin and thinking, and literally thinking about the number go up and how they wanted to have their capital and their optionality tied up in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Now, I will comment that I think Bitcoiners did a very poor job of those, helping the greedy folk who looked at the stock to flow model come in and actually support them and then take them down the rabbit hole as to why you want, freedom money and number go up technology is really, really great, but freedom go up technology is even better, and why you want to stick around when it drops off. But this is where there is no greater adoption than the price going up. When the price goes up, people want to buy it. And this is going to happen till there are 8 billion people or everyone on Earth is owning Bitcoin. So I think we can go and get as deep as we want as far as why you want to hold Bitcoin and the rest of it. But really that surface layer, when there's 7.9 billion people out there who haven't bought into the whole Bitcoin thesis, the number one reason why they're going to be here is that motivator of greed and fear. They're going to fearful of missing out, and they're going to be greedy to get basically some of that number go up technology. So these are the really important things to talk about. And then on the back of talking about that, it also gives, say, the traditional finance resources to see what type of asset this is and how they can integrate that into their systems, which is actually going to further enhance that number go up technology. And this is where I have a lot of to and fro with Bitcoiners talking about, do we really want to be, infiltrating the traditional finance system? This was set up to exclude us from that. And I'm like, just because Bitcoin's adopted by the traditional financial markets doesn't mean you can't do everything that you could do previously with it. And this is where, for the long-term success and survival of Bitcoin, I would like to see it ingratiated into the existing traditional financial system, because once it's got a foothold in there, not only will it really disrupt the apple cart from within, but it'll also ensure its long-term viability and success, because the traditional system will be invested in it as well. So I look at that from maybe a survival mechanism too.
Yeah, and you just touched on one of the things that I've asked people a lot about over the last handful of months. Is something that I think about. I probably spend the most time thinking about is this yin and yang between, I don't know if it was Eric Case on earlier this year when he was on my show or whatever. I don't know who it was, but it was like the number go up, folks, the status, and then the the cypherpunks, And again, like I empathize with both sides. I tend to be the revolutionary, more like, again, the American Revolution, a student of that. And you and I have talked about this over time. And at the same time, again, you got to have the Trojan horse get inside the gates though, somehow. And we do know if it stays decentralized and secure, as Jeff Booth always talks about, right? If we do that, then therefore the people that take on this new protocol, governments, sovereigns, families, whatever it might be, they will change, because we've all changed because of Bitcoin. And that's the thing we have to remember that at the end of the day. Like, if we really do believe that moniker, then these people are going to change too. These entities will change because now they've adopted Bitcoin. They're starting to see the power of it and and educate themselves on it. So yeah, I think it's, I always say that you can't like go build it in the North Pole, go build Bitcoin at the North Pole, like, away from society, and then show up like 20 years from now, like, hey, here's this amazing thing. You guys got to adopt it now. Like, that's not how it works. It's got to be built alongside. So
you raise such a good point. And one thing, as an outsider looking into America, when America's really good, the rest of the world's good. Mm-hmm. So I'm always rooting for America. I want America to be great. And this is where, as a young boy, I grew up with dreams and aspirations to move to America and make it on Wall Street. That never panned out. But to me, what America represents to the rest of the globe is hope and opportunity. So for the last 150 years, America meant hope and opportunity. If you want to test yourself, if you want to go and compete with the best, whether it's the best property markets, the best capital markets, the best of the best were in America competing. And if you were good or if you were great, you got to get ahead and move up that economic ladder. What strikes me since buying into Bitcoin and really understanding it is that totally democratizes and decentralizes the hope and opportunity that America represented.
Yep.
If you look at the flight of capital and human movements, if America had open borders, there'd be about 7 billion people living in America tomorrow, if they could. And this is the thing. What Bitcoin represents to me is the ability for anyone locally living outside of America, me living in New Zealand or Australia or wherever you might be in the globe, if you've got Bitcoin, you've got hope and opportunity. And this is where when 8 billion people come to realize what the power of this thing is, they're going to make their own communities better. They're not going to have the flight of capital and human capital to the US to make it over there. They can make their own locality much better than what it is. And this is where, for me, when you get past that number go up technology, it really is freedom go up technology, and it really represents hope and opportunity, which I think are two things which are really critical to the human spirit.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Peter, because it's something I think about also, again, kind of along the lines of the American Revolution. And you and I might have talked about this before, but the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were really what made America great, obviously, like you said, and gave this opportunity, that this experiment, the Republic, if you can keep it, gave this ability for people to be free, decentralized, authority, all these things. And that's what makes America exceptional. And so you now with the Bitcoin white paper, I've thought of it for years and years of, oh my gosh, Bitcoin, the white paper was the Constitution, was the Bill of Rights, but now it's global. And before it was the Constitution, Bill of Rights. You had to be inside the four walls or at an embassy, maybe at best around the world. Now you can, if you own Bitcoin, you have it anywhere. You have those property rights. You have those rights now anywhere. And that's, I think, the big, that's the killer app that people just don't realize yet. I mean, we're so far from the average person realizing that. It's scary.
That is so true. Like I can tell you the number one rule we talk about with clients is a return of capital, not a return on capital. And this is why I say the US markets represent one of, if not the best market that we can invest in globally. And you juxtapose that to the Chinese market. We've never invested in the Chinese market because we can't get comfortable with the property rights there.
Yeah.
But everyone on earth recognizes that the US has the strongest form of property rights to the articles that you mentioned previously. And then Bitcoin literally democratizes that to anywhere in the world. Yeah. And this is where, a very sincere hope, and, it's very not number go up technology, but I think it's far more important. It has the ability to deliver peace, freedom, hope, and opportunity to the globe anywhere in the world. And this is where my, bent with talking about Bitcoin and the number go up is the lowest common denominator. It's what we all have in common. We all want more, and we're all greedy and fearful at some point in time. So to get that as a hook to get people to understand, and I believe what I'm saying. I think Bitcoin will be multi-billion dollars per coin, and I'm doing my very best to shift that over in a window to billions of dollars per coin, not millions of dollars per coin, because once people realize that they can buy Bitcoin and it's a lottery ticket on the future that's got a 99% chance of coming in, more and more people will buy into that. And then, that old adage that Max Kaiser came up with, which still holds true today, you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. You get to improve society.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And one of my just biggest mentors 20 years ago was Robert Kiyosaki. And, he's a context shifter, right? And it's not like, people come to him thinking like, oh, he's going to teach you how to do real estate. That's not his job. The genius of Robert Kiyosaki is he shifts your context. And that's what I hope to be somewhat like that in like you just mentioned, context shifters, appealing to the monkey brain in all of us, or, the lizard brain, or whatever you want to call it, and the reptilian brain in all of us, where it's the fear and greed quotient. And that's the hook to get people in. And then, okay, now we can educate people because now I have your attention. If I can't sway you away from Kim Kardashian's chest, scrolling through things, then it doesn't matter. Like Peter and I could be talking about the greatest things on earth and all these great rabbit holes and the Bill of Rights and the white paper, but it doesn't matter. It does not matter unless I have your attention. So that's what we're dealing with. So that's
what an image to try and outdo.
Oh man, here's our best try at it. Boy, oh boy. But it's true. I mean, it's just like you can't unless you have to start with those things, and then you can work your way into other topics and things of importance. Because people, as much as Bitcoiners want to, be idealistic about like, hey, we're going to pull things forward. Let's just educate. Like people don't care, like people don't care about education. They don't, a sliver of society cares about like being educated. We're all humans, and most people need to be, hooked in somehow. And to, why is this important to me? Why should I care? You can't just give someone, hey, here's a white paper, read it. Like the average person's going to be like, okay, like cool. Kim Kardashian's chest. Here we go. So it's like, oh boy. It's just
that should be the headline for the
literally
for the pod.
You can tell you get hundreds of I read the comments on my stuff. I'll go around all the videos that I watch as well from all the other Bitcoin content I consume, and you go read the comments. And I was even like going on to some political like stuff that I don't even believe in. I'll go in because again I want to triangulate truth. So I'll go watch things I don't believe. And I was watching stuff on, Bernie Sanders or whatever it was on Trevor Noah's podcast. And the comments are just, it's crazy. The comments on there are all like, these people would be Bitcoiners. I mean, there's like 1,000 comments, a couple thousand comments. There's like millions of views. I think they just did a podcast recently, and they're all the things that these people are yelling about or just, commenting on the video is all the stuff that Bitcoin solves. And you're just sitting there like, huh, like, how do you reach that person? How do you hook that person in? I think that's where it comes back to, like, us talking about the white paper. That ain't going to hook that guy or gal in. It's just not.
No.
So
This is where I think Bitcoin really, a lot of people want to talk about Bitcoin as being a want, but it's really only adopted when it's a need.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where our friend Jeff has got the greatest argument for Bitcoin, I believe. Do you want to live in a world that's getting better every day, that offers hope and opportunity, the ability to progress, the ability for things to get cheaper on a daily basis and make headway? Or do you want to live in a system that's corrupt and corroding and getting harder and harder to work and live in? And I really think Jeff is one of our greatest advocates, and any opportunity I can, I watch his stuff, and he has the most inspiring message to me that, he doesn't talk about number go up.
Right.
He just talks about, hey, do you want to live a better life? And who doesn't want to do that? And this is where, full credit to Jeff and all that he does in this space, that he's really done a lot to help me think about this better. He's done a lot to change my mind on the importance of mean of exchange when it comes to Bitcoin. And I still think I want to be spending fiat dollars before I spend Bitcoin, but in the interest of the greater good and, broadening that network and tying people in and getting them excited about Bitcoin, well, I'll pay 1% to 2% extra per transaction just to buy Bitcoin and spend it with local merchants.
Yeah, agreed. All right, we'll segue a little bit away from Kim Kardashian's chest, and I feel very grateful because I'm able to have you on the show. We just had Jeff on a couple of weeks ago, and just a great talk of a lot of this. Like, how do we square this circle? How do we build this thing and Trojan horse it? So anyway, it was a great one. But I wanted to switch to your thoughts on AI and Bitcoin and what's going on there. Obviously, again, the markets, NVIDIA's popping again. There's all kinds of, different stuff going on here. But the narrative, I just find it funny that the narrative for 15, 16 years was Bitcoin's boiling the oceans. And now we have, all of a sudden, AI is the greatest thing, and it's the most energy intense thing, and it's totally fine. You don't hear any FUD about Bitcoin energy usage anymore, nothing. So it's amazing what's not being said, which is maybe the signal within all the noise. So I'd love your thoughts just on a little of all that, and just kind of just AI and what's happening in that world.
Yeah, I'm not a huge advocate or deep user of AI, but what I can tell from a really high level. So I think it's extremely rich that now that it's convenient for big tech and the US government to need power, all of a sudden that whole boiling the oceans conversation has gone out the window, and we need more power. Like, I just, think of that, what is it, Star Trek, we need more power, Captain Scotty, just working in the engine room, putting those things into hyperdrive. And AI, I think at the moment, is overextended from the perspective of its capabilities and what it's doing. I think what we're seeing at the moment with the reduction in the workforce and a whole host of people being laid off from AI at the moment, I don't think it's AI driven. I think AI is the excuse that good management is giving the shareholders and anyone who'll ask the governments but AI isn't at that level now that it can really replace humans. It can make really good operators of AI superhuman and maybe replace 6 or 7 people, but that's few and far between. What I think we're seeing at the moment is, and we'll continue to see for the next, say, 12 to 24 months, is this is an opportunity to basically unwind all of the DEI and all of the dead wood in these huge organizations. And they can blame it on AI. And so what you're getting from management is a 2-for-1. Not only have they cut costs dramatically, but they've now improved and said that it's AI creating all of these efficiencies within the business, when it wasn't really AI providing the efficiencies. What it was is getting rid of all of the inefficiency in the workforce that they could never fire previously, but now it's socially acceptable to get rid of these people. And there's not going to be any pushback from unions because you've got a perfect excuse. And from a share market perspective, everyone's literally clapping their hands like seals going, oh, isn't this amazing? The company I own has just got all of these efficiencies. I don't even think we've started to see the real impact of AI, and we're not going to see that for the next 12 to 18 months. The good part about that is that I think it puts Bitcoiners at a very, well, it gives us a huge advantage to what I think the rest of the TradFi world looks at, because most Bitcoiners have really understood what the power needs are. They understand Bitcoin mining. They understand how the Bitcoin miners can be turned up and down literally in an instant to help with the load in the network. And it's a net benefit for society. And this is where I think you're going to have AI piggyback on a whole host of those arguments that the Bitcoin miners came up with to really start pushing the need for a whole host of energy. And this is one thing that I'm not, that I'm actually very, very positive on from an AI perspective, is that if you look at the amount of energy that each society has, the more successful a society is, the more power they have. And so the fact that these AI companies and software companies are going to build out a huge amount of power to run this, I am wildly positive on that, because it's going to improve all of our lives. And this is where I think it's going to be a big step forward for us. I just haven't seen anything meaningful at this point in time that's going to replace a whole host of people. Having said that, I can tell you my business partner, Andy, is an absolute whiz on AI, and he's been able to do things for the company that we could never have done without it. But he is a very, very talented operator of that, and a one of one. So
that's amazing. What do you, you just kind of touched on something that made me think of it, like just nuclear, the Bitcoin mine, obviously AI and the Bitcoin miners are getting a bid just because of this, this story playing out, right? The data, we need more storage, you need more warehouses, need more square footage, and then nuclear just makes me think of that, just the renewables, but also just the nuclear that, again, it really has to, you see like articles, you see things here and there about nuclear, but I would imagine it has to enter the chat at some point here where things are really kicking off more. And again, I know that's a process going to take a little while, but hopefully the SMR, the small modular reactors, things like that, are a little more, a little quicker, I guess, but to come to market. But what are your thoughts just with that, like how Bitcoin mining will really play with AI moving forward and just kind of helping this energy? Like you said, I guess that what made me think of it was just the amount of energy a society uses does behoove the society, obviously, in that management and the ability to scale and grow that out. So, I guess from your 100,000 foot view, like where do you see all that coming together?
I think of something my brother and I talked about a little while ago. He came up with the notion that Bitcoin miners would help us create free energy because it's so energy intensive. The majority of costs for Bitcoin mining run through the actual energy itself. The cost of the Bitcoin mining equipment is about 20%, and typically 80% is in the actual energy cost provided. So because it's a global competition that happens every 10 minutes that's open to anyone who can have internet access, there is a huge incentive to create free energy. And both AI and the Bitcoin miners, what I see happening is they are going to force down the cost of energy. And so this is on a global scale. The amount, from what I'm seeing, the bottlenecks in AI is going to be around the infrastructure, not so much the chips, but really the electricity grid and how to actually feed the power to the machines. That's going to be the biggest bottleneck that I've seen. That's going to create the ability to do a whole host of things with regulations that we've never seen before. They're going to push through that SMR technology on the nuclear front. And I look at that and think that's probably the most likely outcome, because on a cost benefit basis, on a per square foot basis, it has the smallest impact. Once they get that technology right, and this is where I'm like, once they get that technology right, they've had that in submarines for the last 50 years. So I don't know what there is to do. Just figure out what they did there and make sure we replicate it in a way that's safe, or put a small army around it so it can't be compromised. But they're going to build that out as quickly as they can. They're going to distribute that. That to me makes the most amount of sense, because that's going to be the easiest way to scale. That isn't going to put added pressure on the electricity grid. So I think you're going to have basically places pop up all over the place, and this is where the Bitcoin miners are so powerful. They're basically monetizing and electrifying places of the earth that, have never seen electricity before. So I think we're going to see more of that.
Now that you have your hardware wallet, the key data generated needs to be stored in something forever that can withstand fire, flood, nuclear fallout, checks, hockey pucks. This is your 12-word C plate, your 24-word C plate. After a lot of people asking for a 12-word seed plate, here it is, stampseed.com, code Brandon for 15% off. After everything that's going on in the world, fires we've seen in the Pacific Palisades, what we've seen happen in Hawaii, everything gone. Titanium seed plates withstands everything. Your posterity will thank you. It only takes a few minutes. Don't let these little things, these small investments scare you from the most important aspects of Bitcoin and the first money we have ever conceived here on Earth. Stampseed.com, code Brandon for 15% off. Everything you are learning in this episode is completely moot and does not matter if you hold Bitcoin and are still leaving it on an exchange or sharing keys and your KYC information with a third party. This is your wake-up call now. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. 100% self-custody sounds daunting at first. Believe me, I lost 2 years of massive gains over a decade ago because I was worried about taking the few minutes it took to understand self-custody. And that's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Yazbek and his team at the Bitcoin Way. We just interviewed Tony recently, has over 80,000 views, an overwhelming response. People love his story and the simplicity he shares of how easy it is to custody and take ownership of the greatest money we've ever seen. They'll train you to do it right the first time. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. Quit sitting on your hands like I did and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/BRANDON. Fascinating. It really is an interesting time we're about to enter into. What are the business cycle, what are your thoughts on the business cycle, the ISM, the consumer sentiment, M2, there's rate cuts, we're obviously in this really like tightening, really the last couple of years. I mean, for the most part, just this tightening, the rates were up here in America, and now it seemingly is starting to roll over a little bit. I would love your thoughts on just kind of what you see from a macro perspective here with things seemingly changing.
Yeah, I think rates have to roll over at some point in time. I think there are parts of the economy that are really struggling, and they're going to greatly benefit from the reduction in rates, and it will help them significantly. And then the best performing parts of the economy, it doesn't change anything that they're doing. The dropping of rates doesn't mean they're going to go out and take on more risk. It doesn't mean they're going to willfully take on debt that they don't need anything for. The dropping of the rates, I think, is going to be really important for two things. Firstly, it's going to help, obviously, the government and the debt that they've got built in the US, but it's also going to help with the affordability of the build out of this, $1 to $2 or $10 trillion that's required to build out this AI infrastructure that we're talking of right now. And one thing that I'm really interested in watching how this plays out over the next few years is one of the biggest things or biggest problems that I've seen in the US Treasury markets is the US government's inability to sell the long end of the curve with the 50-year mortgage that Trump's trumpeting. This is actually going to be very good, I think, for the long end of the yield curve when it comes to the US Treasury market, because now they've got a buyer of a 50-year mortgage. So they can sell 50-year paper. So I think there is some method to the madness with Trump talking about a 50-year term. On the face of it, it looks like a really bad idea, and it looks like indebted servitude for someone's entire life. But at the same time, it lowers the monthly payment. It allows them to invest in Bitcoin. It allows them to get into the market. And it also, and this is where I haven't seen anyone really talk about this, it also helps the US Treasury market solve the long end of the yield curve. They'll now have a buyer for that long end of the yield curve that they'll have to match up some liabilities.
Man, it really is. Boy, that's a really good at the point I didn't really think about. What are your thoughts on speaking of some liquidity, some of this rolling over? Obviously, the treasury companies have been down. Or just been taking their lumps. They've been down, just kind of tumbling all over the place. Price, obviously, like we've mentioned a little bit of Bitcoin, obviously, again, consolidation, building this kind of launch pad seemingly. But what are your thoughts on, Saylor with their, again, they just a couple new offerings. Again, they seem to be every week they've got, they're in the lab cooking up something new. Metaplanet over on your side of the world. Strive, some of the big ones, their acquisition of SMRs. I would love your thoughts on just some of this. We haven't talked since that SMRs acquisition either. So I would love your thoughts on just kind of, how you're seeing this shake out right now.
I think this is a healthy shakeout. It's been a very painful one if you invested 3 months ago or 4 months ago, but I think it's a very real one. Do I think the treasury companies are just going to pack up shop and go away? No, I don't. I think there's going to be winners and losers. I think probably the most nuanced view, which I'd agree with, is Checkmatey talking about there's going to be winners and losers. The top tier companies are going to continue to have access to capital and build their lead, and the companies that aren't so strong are going to fade away. And we've seen, I think, the advent of that. And this is where I think the innovation that's going to come to market, what Saylor's been able to create with the STRC product, I think is a 0 to 1 moment. I think it's this is going to be a huge moment for attracting capital. It's going to have access to $5 to $7 trillion worth of idle capital sitting on the sidelines that's getting 0% interest. And it's going to be able to, I think, take a huge chunk of that. And at the same time, what that does for the MSTR shareholders is it allows Saylor to buy a chunk of Bitcoin with no dilution in the share price, in the amount of Bitcoin per share or the amount of shares issued. So I think that is a fabulous product that is going to be very beneficial for a whole host of parties. It's going to be very beneficial for those holding cash. It's going to be wildly beneficial for Saylor and MSTR shareholders. And at the same time, it's going to be really beneficial for anyone who's got trading accounts leaving cash at the bank. And, the US trading went from T+3 to T+1 in the last 12 months, I think. So now you have effectively instant settlement. That cash is good within 1 day if you park it in STRC. So there is going to be a pile of cash that flows into that product. And some of the projected growth I've seen over the last, say, 4 weeks is an insane growth figure of over 20% annualized, over 20% growth per week, week on week, which means this could be one of Saylor, if not Saylor's biggest product. That to me is the money product for them. And then for the people who are buying it, the benefit of that is that you get what's called tax deferred, and you get to receive 10% per annum with no tax payable on it at that moment you receive it. When if you're on a 50% tax rate, that literally gets grossed up to a 20+% return. That is a huge deal. People aren't living on that. This is the return of real interest rates. So I look at this and think, this is going to be very disruptive once the broader market understands what that product is. It's going to be wildly beneficial for MSTR shareholders, really great for Michael Saylor. And I think it'll be really interesting to see if he can outdo himself on that, because I look at that as the killer product that he's created so far.
Yeah. What is the I want to tangent away and then kind of come back to some of this Bitcoin rotation stuff. But what's your take on just like the BRICS, this geopolitically, like what's going on? What is your, being in the eastern part of the world, you see it more than a lot of Americans do, obviously, when there's trade with China and things of that nature. What are you seeing from your perspective on people going around the dollar, and obviously Russia, China, some of these different players in the system, just saying, hey, or actively going around, not just saying, but just actively trying to move around the dollar, and just kind of BRICS update in general, whether it's, hey, we're moving to gold, or we're trying to get on some digital system with Bitcoin or whatever. But what's your 100,000 foot view?
I think a lot of the coverage I see out of the US is very negative on the US economy, the debasement, the Fed, the whole lot. And I think with, say, a broader view on the world and what's happening, as bad as it is in the US, it's far worse everywhere else. And I can't see, although the BRICS has had some success, I think through time there will be a whole host of reasons why that will fail. The US has been the global reserve currency for really the last 80 years. Since Bretton Woods, and there's no real need to change it, because although the debasement's bad of 7 to 10% per annum, it's far worse in every other country. So what you're really looking to do is ensure and protect yourself from this debasement trade. And China's trying to set up basically a gold exchange and a gold-backed yuan. But I ask you, having some understanding of how people cook books, the US, for all intents and purposes, has got one currency that trades globally, both internally and externally. The key supporter of the BRICS is China, and they have an internal and an external set of books, and an internal and external currency, one for trade inside the country and one for trade outside the country. Who on earth is going to base their trade on a dual system currency? I just think no chance. Wow. There's a whole host of people wanting to hate on America for that, but it's like, at least you've got one set of books. Yeah. You don't need to inspect and reconcile two sets of books. So, yeah, I think it could happen, but the chances of it happening are slim to none.
What are your thoughts on the, I feel like every year or two we have the yen carry trade kind of comes up into debate, discussion, what have you. Is that something that's just going to exist just kind of as long as the fiat, this experiment just keeps kind of trudging along? Like, what do you see for just Japan, I guess, and the kind of their role in the global financial space right now?
Japan's been the lender of last resort, or lender of first resort, for a long time for that yen carry trade for a whole host of hedge funds. What I see happening is that role is going to continue into the future, and the repeal of SAB 121 is going to give cover for global banks, all banks globally, to now start custodying Bitcoin and creating loan products on Bitcoin. And this is where I really push hard with clients to own the underlying Bitcoin rather than, and all of our clients have got access to ETFs and treasury companies and everything else. But if you take a long-term view of 5 to 10 years on this, I really push hard for clients to own the underlying Bitcoin, because they will be able to take advantage of the yen carry trade on a personal basis. At the moment, the yen carry trade is only accessible to high net worth investors, hedge funds, companies, you name it. Basically, you need to have a huge amount of capital to really take advantage of that. But Bitcoin is the first globally ubiquitous capital that will be recognized by every bank on earth. And if it's the best form of collateral, there are going to be a whole host of incentives given to put up Bitcoin as collateral versus anything else. And so as long as Japan's rates get to stay as low as they are, they're going to be a source of loans globally for Bitcoiners all over the earth who are prepared to put their Bitcoin into custody with a bank and borrow from a bank. And this is where we've got clients who access Japanese rates at somewhere between 0.5% to 1.2% on commercial property. So can you imagine you run a business in property, and I'm just literally, Grant Cardone and Gary is just screaming in my head right now. They rely on a business that requires really cheap cost of capital to get a competitive advantage. And if you can access capital at 0.5% to 1.2% versus in the US at 5, 6, or even 7%, think of how much more profitable you can be as a business, how much more you're prepared to pay for that property. So this is where all of a sudden things are going to get really out of kilter very quickly. And if you don't have that underlying Bitcoin, you're going to be at a huge disadvantage to anyone who does that can use that as collateral into the future.
It is really wild. Is there anything that I'm trying to think of the best way to ask it. Is there anything out there that you maybe thought of yourself, or you're kind of waiting for Saylor, or some of these companies, or somebody to drop something where something that's on your mind, or you're like, hey, we're missing the mark here, or there's something, that a product that could be offered, or something to that effect?
I think an annuity style product for Bitcoiners would be very, very helpful. I know of one product coming to market that, for all intents and purposes, it looks like an annuity product, smells like an annuity product, acts like an annuity product, but it isn't. So I think that will be hugely successful. I'm not at liberty to talk about it now, but I think that will come to market in the very near future, and that will be excellent. I'm really impressed with Zach at Meanwhile. His insurance product, what he's building out there, is a behemoth. Once that thing gets going, it's going to be the insurer globally, and it'll be like, the MicroStrategy of insurance. So I think what he's building is really impressive. I would love to come up with one of these ideas that's going to completely disrupt the market, but I stick to what I know, which is collaborative security and making sure people don't lose their Bitcoin. And if they self-custody, giving them an avenue to avoid any single point of failure. So I've got a lot of work to do in that space too. So maybe the killer app revolves there, and I need to look closer to home.
Yeah, no, they're the Meanwhile, what they're doing, they're actually a new sponsor of our show, and the life insurance stuff is something I've fought with a couple of my buddies over time, just in the traditional legacy world of whole life, and they were big in that space, and I just would always go back and forth with them, like, why would I, like, I'll get like a simple term, a short term, insurance policy, but then I'm just going to invest in Bitcoin long term. Like, why would I have a whole life? Why would I pay into all this when you're giving me 4 or 5% back? Like, it makes no sense. And we last like 5 years, we just go round and round. And So I don't know. It's interesting what they're doing though. And it's all Bitcoin denominated. I think that's, again, what Saylor's doing. Everyone's starting to denominate everything in Bitcoin. The Bitcoin per share, all that is really one of those great reframings as well. You talked like those 0 to 1 moments, but it's really those great reframings of people starting to understand, think of things in sats, think of things in Bitcoin. Those things are so incredibly important, because then you start seeing your life continue to get cheaper, and people start thinking in those terms instead of just dollars all the time or whatever fiat they're in.
Yeah. It's funny on that front. We created a loan product in that vein that is completely Bitcoin denominated, and it's very difficult to get your head around because it's a Bitcoin denominated loan and you need to repay Bitcoin. And so a lot of people are like, why would I do that? And for all intents and purposes, not many people would do that. And this loan product's out there. We've got it working. We talk most clients out of actually using that product because we see very few ways to make a meaningful return on that. But in order to make that loan product work, you need to outperform Bitcoin. And to our point earlier, it's very difficult to outperform Bitcoin. I think there are some pockets that enable you to do it. I think the Bitcoin treasury companies, if you pick the right moment to invest and have a long-term view, I think you can outperform Bitcoin, but it comes with a huge amount of risk too. And this is where we're going to see more and more Bitcoin denominated products come to market that serve a need for Bitcoiners who have Bitcoin as their denominator. And this is where that Loan My Coins product, I think what it offers that's really unique is it allows you to borrow 95% on your Bitcoin. It allows for no counterparty risk other than the 48 hours that your Bitcoin's in escrow. And it allows for no margin call. All of those three things are wildly useful if you're a Bitcoiner and you're used to borrowing on Bitcoin. But it just takes time to educate the market as to why that would be a really good thing and how they'd be able to use it. And this is where we're in the business of education and really extolling the virtues of Bitcoin. But it's a slow grind to really get everyone up to speed on that.
It is. It's a grind for all of us. Everyone educating everywhere, and it's coming up into the times of year here in, especially in America, Thanksgiving and things like that, where you're educating, you're talking to a lot of family, a lot of friends, a lot of people. They're asking about Bitcoin. So, but again, that's why we're here. That's why we're called to do this. It's a calling at the end of the day, something that pulls you inside to educate people about this stuff. How do you guys get, explain, so that, loaning up to 95%, or lending up to 95%, how does that work? Like, how do you guys get away with that? Like, how does that, I would love for you to just unpack that for a second, just so the average person kind of understands that.
I know it sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
When you hear 95% lend, the immediate concern I have when I hear anything over 60% is margin call. Basically, You're going to get margin call, you're going to lose your Bitcoin, and then you have a problem. But because you're borrowing Bitcoin on your Bitcoin, you don't have a margin call, because your obligation is to repay Bitcoin. So all of a sudden, that removes the concern around a margin call, because if your collateral drops that you have borrowed Bitcoin on, your Bitcoin value drops as well. So what you've got is effectively a matching of that. And how we've structured this to avoid any concerns is, after a 360-day period, you're required to either pay the interest for the next 12 months, or alternatively settle up your loan by repaying that Bitcoin back. And so because you're borrowing in Bitcoin and you're repaying in Bitcoin, you don't have a margin callable event.
That is very interesting. Very, very interesting. Obviously we'll link to stuff so people can learn more about it. It's wild. We're at a wild time because there are so many products, there's so many financial services, there's so many things really starting to come out. I shouldn't say there's a lot. I mean, there's more and more coming, every single week. So at times it feels like there's a lot going on. I mean, there's still not tons and tons of stuff out there by any means. We're still a little bit wild west with the financial services that are out there, but the things that are coming, like some of the things you alluded to, some of the things that are out there already are really fascinating. And again, coming from the real estate world and the world that I was in, raising money, using debt, and navigating that world a lot. I mean, it's something that speaks to me a lot. And it's, hey, the things that you're comfortable working with and doing stuff with, obviously you have your self-custody and the different, setups and stuff like that. So that's the most important thing, as you mentioned earlier. But at the same time, how are we operating these two worlds?
That's the interesting thing, and this is where, say, that whole evolution on the Loan My Coins product came about because I'd taken out a loan with one of the companies that sponsors a lot of people in this space, and that's a company I love, Ledin. I put up some Bitcoin as collateral, got a loan out in fiat terms. My concern with that, though, was I've got counterparty risk and I've got a margin call if Bitcoin drops. And I was thinking there needs to be a better way to do this. I took that loan out to take advantage of the Bitcoin treasury companies. I thought, and I still do think, that there's some upside over and above Bitcoin long term. And what we created with that loan product of Bitcoin to Bitcoin as opposed to Bitcoin to fiat is, versus, say, the traditional lenders, it allows you to borrow double the amount for the same collateral, or it allows you to put up half as much collateral with no counterparty risk and no margin call. And so I think it's for very specific use cases, it's going to be a fabulous product. But for 9 out of 10 people who want to borrow using their Bitcoin, it's going to be a disastrous product. And we spend more time talking people out of using that product than using it, because they'll be best served by going to Debify or Hodl Hodl or Ledin or one of the other great institutions that are out there that have been serving people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that you guys do that, because it's something that, Bitcoiners obviously get very leery of things like that. But then I have a problem with people on like the other side, like the Dave Ramseys of the world, who kind of treat everyone like they're idiots, basically. And it's like, just speaking to the lowest common denominator of like, well, none of you should do anything and just, save in a currency that's being, diluted, and you just keep losing wealth over time. And he just treats everyone like, again, we're all on a spectrum. So, everyone's got different levels of intelligence, and that's life. That's what makes life beautiful. So I think that's where all these products, all these services
I am on the spectrum, yes.
All of us ADIQ plebs know that very well, that we're all on a spectrum somewhere. Oh man, but
so true.
Anyway, my whole point with saying that was that I forgot to land the plane. Was that he does say a lot that find someone to mentor you, help you, that has the heart of a servant or a heart of a teacher, right? Even if it's a financial person or whatever, have someone that's the heart of a teacher, and you have to know what you're doing as well in order to take the mentorship or the teaching of that teacher. You do need to know what's going on. So anyway, I love that you guys educate people because and talk people out of it, because that is what we should be doing really at the end of the day, right? It's not for everybody. So I love that.
No, that's it. And this is where I'm really grateful to the Bitcoin community. They've given me so much, and we try and give back. The purpose of the business with the Bitcoin Advisor is to help people not lose their Bitcoin and self-custody. Mm-hmm. And once that is accomplished, the next goal of the business is to help them get more Bitcoin. And so we want to help people add to their stack and protect it, not be a cause of people losing Bitcoin. So that's our goal long term, and that's what we've been pretty successful at doing over the years.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's everyone. I think of Tony over at the Bitcoin Way, and he's always like, don't do anything, and I love him, like I love you and you're doing, I love Tony and what they're doing, and it's like, that's the beauty of the Bitcoin space. Again, that's like you have all these different personalities on a spectrum, and they all each have their own place in time, which is really the coolest thing about Bitcoin, to be totally honest. It's this foray into something that you just don't know. Like you said earlier, you get into because of price, and then you get into it because of that, and then you open up this Pandora's box you just didn't even know existed. So very, very cool. And
the funny thing is, at the end of the day, we're all on the same team.
Exactly.
We all want the same.
That's the beauty of it. It's funny. I mean, like every, Bitcoin educator, content creator, podcaster, Bitcoin business, like all of us doing our part, hodler, whoever you are on the Bitcoin network, we're all working towards the same goal. We all benefit from whatever activity that person is doing. We all benefit. We joked earlier about the Jamie Dimons and the Saylors being the employee of the month. Like what all of them selling, millions of people are. That's good for us. I mean, it's a positive sum network instead of a zero sum network like fiat. So it's incredible.
So true.
So cool. All right.
It's that zero sum game is really hard for people to get their heads out of. That's the funny thing about Bitcoin, is that everyone can benefit from it. Whereas fiat is typically a zero sum game. Some win, some lose, but everyone can win with Bitcoin, which is very unique.
So it is. It's truly, and like you, yeah, it is so hard for people to wrap their minds around. I have to pinch myself sometimes. So I have to ask you, in saying all this, these last couple to wrap here, was point one Bitcoin, all the things we talk about, fear and greed in marketing, hooking people and getting them away from Kim Kardashian's chest, was point one Bitcoin? Was it all lies? Is it all a scam? People starting to jump off the ship. We got capitulation galore. We talked about a lot of unbelievable things here today. But what are we looking at here? Is it just like some clickbait marketing thing? What are we looking at here, Peter?
I think point one was directionally correct. I just think the timing's a little bit out, but in the space of a technology that I think will be around for the next 10,000 years, if you're a decade out, does it really mean is there really a problem? Point one of a Bitcoin, just buy it and sit on it. And I think in the next 10 years, I think there's 100x in the next 10 years in front of us quite easily. And I hear a lot of people think, oh, no way, power law, this has happened, that's happened, all the rest of it's like, look, all I can tell you is we've been giving Bitcoin advice for the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, clients are sitting on a 200x return.
Yeah.
Do I think they're going to get half the amount of return in the next 10 years? Yeah, I think they will. I think that's far more feasible than what the alternatives are out there. And if you can get 0.1 of a Bitcoin, that'll give you $1 million, and that'll be growing at circa 250,000 per annum, or 25% per annum for the next 20 years. And 250 grand a year to live on for the next 20 years is pretty good. And I think, if you can wait a decade before you cash in your chips on that, then point one's, that's a great marketing play.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I wholeheartedly believe the same thing. Like I would never talk about it if I didn't believe it. Like it's sort of repricing. It's a great reframing. And I feel like that's almost the moniker in a way going forward too, is the great reframing of the mind, of thinking in sats, thinking in Bitcoin, instead of constantly trying to revert back to the fiat world. And it will help people really internalize this more. You kind of touched on this. I would love your thoughts on the end game. I think I asked you 6 months ago, last time you were on, or whenever it was, 5-6 months ago. But there's 450 trillion in assets. There's 900 trillion, $900 trillion in assets. And Jack Mallers says it's going to be 450 trillion is the Bitcoin's end game. Jeff Booth says it's going to be all 900 trillion. We got to account for everything. There's people way below that. Obviously, lots of people there. You've always been one of the few that have said it's going beyond that. It's going to be, billions of dollars a coin. It's going to be, I would love for you to unpack this, as you kind of just alluded to this a minute ago, of the potential of Bitcoin. Like what is its final resting spot, whether it's 10 years from now or 100 or 1,000 years from now? What's that final resting spot in your mind?
I think if we strip back, what are the assumptions that we're making? The assumptions that I make is that 8 billion people are going to need Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Now, only maybe 10 million people really understand what the problem is and see it as a need, not a want. But over the next 20, 50, 100 years, whatever it might be, everyone on Earth will understand it's a need, not a want. It will be a ubiquitous need, the same as shelter, the same as food, the same as water. You'll need incorruptible money that can't be diluted by anyone. With that as a base for what I see happening, there are going to be 8 billion people who want to store their future monetary value with the greatest optionality. And I look at this and think, I can only draw conclusions from what we can see and what we've experienced over the last 25 years. You look at Jeff Bezos, you look at Elon Musk, those guys are 100% committed to the cause of owning their own stock and never selling. Now, I think there's been some liquidity events for Jeff Bezos recently, but for 30 years, he basically held that stock. He didn't sell, and that had a compounded annual growth rate of 25%. What happens to 8 billion people when they can own a stock like Amazon, when they can buy in pre-IPO, which is basically where Bitcoin is right now, and they can hold that for their future optionality? This is where the market is way bigger than anyone can imagine. And by my calculations, I try and do a really simple job of looking at this. We're going to have a market that is going to be multiple times bigger than all of the assets in the world, like right now. So if we look at maybe there's $1 trillion worth of assets in the world right now, I look at Jeff Bezos, most of his net assets are tied up in his Amazon stock. I look at Elon, tied up in Tesla and whatever else it might be. For everyone else on Earth, once they figure out what Bitcoin is, the majority of their value is going to be tied up in Bitcoin. And so 99% of 7 billion people are going to have their wealth tied up in Bitcoin. And they might be spending maybe 1% of their entire, 1% of their entire net worth per annum on assets and the rest of it, which means the market for Bitcoin needs to be $100 quadrillion or 100 times bigger than the total assets in the world right now. That to me makes perfect sense, understanding how money works and understanding that people will not want to spend everything they have to consume what they need today. They're going to want to have savings. They want to have future optionality of that. And this is where the market for Bitcoin is going to be infinitely bigger than anyone can imagine, because it gives you the most optionality in the future. And this is why Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk don't sell their stock, is because they believe that stock is going to grow faster than anything else. And when 7 billion people believe that Bitcoin is growing faster than, say, those stocks, it will actually be true to form. And when we've got a functioning credit market and Bitcoin as collateral propping up the entire financial system, people are never going to have to sell their Bitcoin. So it's going to be an asset like we've never seen before, because it's going to underwrite the entire financial system and recapitalize it. So to say that there's $1 billion Bitcoin in the future, I'm certain of that. I just don't know if it's going to be in 10 years, 20 years, or it might be 50. But my expectation is Bitcoin goes to $1 billion a coin, and I think it will be in our lifetime.
Yeah, I tend to believe that as well. I think it has to do the accounting. It's all money correlates to one. You're going to have a world where you have to, it has to be reckoned with. Merit and accountability and responsibility have to assert itself, reassert itself, I should say, back into society, and it's going to have to account for all the shenanigans going on. And like you said, whether it's 10 years from now or 100 years from now or whatever, 50 years from now, it has to come crashing back down and reaccount. So anything else on your mind? Where can people find you? It's an incredible talk, Peter. Anything else we haven't covered yet about, Bitcoin Advisor, or anything else out there that we haven't covered that you really wanted to touch on?
I think we've pretty much covered everything. I'd just like to say a personal thank you for all that you do in the space. You work tirelessly on getting fabulous guests, asking really great conversations. Well, you have great conversations with your guests. You get the best out of them. And this is where I'd just like to say a big round of applause and a very sincere thank you for all that you do in the space, and appreciate you having me on and all that you do. So, yeah, keep crushing it.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate you a ton. You're one of my favorites, and I love the way your mind works, and you're one smart person. So I appreciate, you saying that. It means a lot, truly. So thank you.
Appreciate you. Thanks, man.
If you like that episode, then you're going to love the playlist we put together for you with our most recent podcast with the top Bitcoiners, sound money, liberty advocates in the world. Go check those out here. We'll see you inside. You're going to love them.